Howdy. So I'm going to go over recovering the secrets that are generated when a tenant is constructed. There are situations where those secrets can become corrupted or lost. And so this will just be a walkthrough on how to recover those secrets if you're in that situation. Let's start with the documentation. We'll go over here to the restoring from backups runbook. You can find this in the GitLab dedicated issue tracker repository, which is called team. In the runbooks directory, restore from backups markdown. And it's the very last, or second to last thing in here, GitLab configuration secrets. Okay, so you'll need to execute the following from a configure stage operator access pod using the configure AWS profile. That might not mean much to you, but I'm going to show you what it means. So let's jump over into, in that same runbooks directory, there is also a connecting to AWS resources runbook, and this is what we're going to use to access the pod that we need. This gives you some information just generally on how to set up your environment, but I'm going to skip most of it and just say what you're going to need to do is start in the AMP repository. So if we go over to a terminal, I'll jump into the AMP repository and we'll get started. First thing we're going to do is sign into the 1Password command line interface tool. Next, we're going to set our environment variables appropriately for the AMP cluster that we're going to be using. In this case, the AMP cluster we're using is US Pub Sec Ops, or US Public Sector Operations. If you look in the directory that's specified in this section, it will tell you how to find other AMP clusters, AMP cluster names. But I'm just going to take this example. Happens to be the right one. Now this is going to ask me to sign in twice. That's expected. And we'll be doing a multi-factor with my YubiKey. And like I said, it is going to ask me to do this twice, so that's okay. Oh gosh. I'll just delete that, so I'll just gray that out in the video. I accidentally pasted my password into a plain text field. Okay, so we've now set up those environment variables. Let's go back to the documentation, and we're going to just get Kubernetes context set up because we will be connecting to a Kubernetes cluster. And now we're going to set the tenant model. Now you can see here, note for USA GovCloud models, use the commented command instead. So this is for most tenants, but we're actually going to use this commented one, which is for GovCloud. And I'm just going to make my life a little bit easier by using some tab completion. Anything that's in these angle brackets generally should be replaced with valid information. The tenant that we're using is called validate, so I'm just going to vtab. You can see that it was already guessing that because I'm in Zish, but here we are. And now I can check to make sure that tenant model is set correctly just by echoing it out, and sure enough, the tenant ID is validate. So everything's looking good so far. Let's go back to the instructions. So we've just done this, and now we're going to start up a operator access pod inside of the AMP cluster. And if we look at the other instructions, you need to execute the following from a configure stage operator access pod. So the stage is going to be replaced with configure. And then this -T 1440 or 14400, that tells the system how long the pod will survive. So keep in mind, and it's in seconds, keep in mind that you'll want to set this plenty past the amount of time you think it's going to take for you to complete your recovery. You wouldn't want the pod that you're doing your recovery from to terminate mid-recovery. Okay. Now this next section is going to be executed inside of this pod. You can see we are now inside of a different shell than we were before. I'm no longer seeing my Rocket Girl GitLab Dell prompt. And so in this new shell, we're going to have to set up some environment variables so that we can use the AWS CLI. And if you remember over here, using the configure AWS profile, what that means is that we're going to have to make a minor change here, but I'll copy this and we're just going to change it live. So provision becomes configure. Oh, and generate config is not a valid uh, argument for that. This does take a couple seconds, but don't get alarmed. Okay, and now we can just make sure that we do in fact have the right profile. Echo AWS profile, I should say configure, it does. Okay, if you're following instructions in the restore from backups runbook, return to those instructions now, and that's what we're going to do. Just in case you're wondering, this command is really just here to demonstrate that you now have access to Kubernetes if we had been actually in a provision pod. So I'm going to skip that for this demo because we don't need it. So like it says, let's return to the restore from backups runbook. So we're now in a configure stage operator access pod with the configure AWS profile. Let's set up some environment variables. So this is going to give us our tenant ID, which is validate. That's correct. And then we're going to get the tenant region. And that's govwest1. That is also correct. And this is pretty straightforward. This command here will give us the secret in the form of a file. So let's just fire it off. There we go. Now, I don't want to actually cat the file out, but you can see it does have 19K in it. So we know it has been populated. The next step is going to be talked about here. In all cases, the copy stored on the first Gitlab node is the source of truth for all other nodes. It is deployed to other VMs and Kubernetes secrets by the configure stage Ansible. So what we need to do is figure out what the situation is. There's two possibilities listed here. One of them is that the GitLab Secrets JSON has been lost from all of the nodes, and the other is that it has been corrupted on one or some of the nodes. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate the corruption version of this because it's a little bit more localized, but I will mention as I'm going how you would implement this first section. Now, in order to get our secret, our GitLab Secrets JSON onto a node, I'm actually going to jump up to the Gitlab common procedure to restore data from a recovered volume. I'm going there because it gives us the command for jumping into an instance. And in this case, we'll also need to go get an instance name, which I happen to already have up here. So this is, I'll find it for you, just walk you through it. So if you go to EC2 and then instances, and in the list here, you can see the Gitlab1 node, and I'm just going to copy the instance ID. Okay, let's go back to those instructions, and we'll just take this command. All right, now I'm inside of this giddly1 node. Now, what I didn't do uh, before accessing this node was cat the GitLab secret JSON to the terminal. The reason I didn't do that is because I don't want to show you all of these secrets, but what I could have done is just catted it out to the terminal. In other words, just to demonstrate, I could have typed cat space GitLab underscore secrets.json, and that would have echoed it out to the terminal. And I literally could have copied it off the terminal. It's a small enough amount of data that you can store it in your copy paste clipboard. So let's just assume I have it in my clipboard. And so what I would then do is say, let's just say we're going to go to /temp and then I would edit the GitLab secrets.json that I just created and paste in whatever I had copied. I'm actually going to paste in nothing. I'll just give it some random data here. I'll say hello world. So I've got this GitLab secrets JSON that I pasted in from this file, and I've got another one, presumably a corrupted one, which exists on the first GitLab server. So if we go to the instructions real fast, oops, we'll go all the way back down to the section that we're actually working on here. And you see that in Etsy, GitLab secrets JSON, that is where that file is generally stored. So let's go to Etsy GitLab. And there it is, GitLab secrets JSON. And what you could do at this point is something like diff-y, GitLab secrets JSON, and /temp /GitLab secrets JSON. And it would tell you the differences, and you could potentially repair them that way by copying the valid entries out of the /temp file, out of this file, and putting them into the live file. So you could repair this particular file that way. Now, another thing you could do in this situation is because the giddly1 node is the source of truth, you could let's just say that the GitLab secrets JSON in Etsy GitLab on the giddly1 node had been deleted somehow, and it had also been deleted from all of the other nodes. We could create this file and again paste the contents of the GitLab secrets JSON we just recovered using this command and paste it into here. Then once it was in there, you can rerun the Ansible to deploy this file to all of the other nodes and locations that it needs to be, because this giddly1 node is the source of truth. So yeah, that actually running that is not going to be covered in this video, but that's what you could do. So we've now restored the file in theory, or we have redeployed it to all of the other nodes, and we're good to go. So all that's left is cleanup. In this case, I have made a file in the temp directory that contains secrets, so I'm going to delete that. And then I'm just going to exit out. And I'm in this, now I'm back into the operator access pod that's running in AMP. And I'm going to exit out of that as well. And I'm going to delete that pod. This one. Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching.